What began as a quiet diplomatic conference in Brussels has just exploded into the most dangerous moment in modern European politics. For the first time since taking office, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has delivered a direct, public warning to Vladimir Putin, a message so blunt, so unexpected, that analysts are calling it the British roar heard across the continent. It happened less than 24 hours ago. The setting, the NATO Security Forum, an event usually filled with polite speeches and rehearsed reassurances. But this time, the atmosphere was electric. War tensions were already high following Russia's renewed military buildup near Eastern Europe. Intelligence leaks suggested unusual troop movements near the Baltics, and whispers of an impending cyber campaign had every capital on edge. When Starmer took the stage, most expected another carefully scripted show of solidarity. Instead, he threw the script away. Standing before a wall of NATO flags, Starmer stared directly into the camera, his tone steady, his words surgical. "Mr. Putin," he began, "Britain will not stand by while Europe is threatened. The age of appeasement is over. Any strike against a NATO ally will be treated as an attack on us all, and we will respond." The hall went silent. No teleprompter, no hesitation. Just the unmistakable ring of confrontation. Within minutes, the speech went viral. Starmer vs. Putin began trending across social media, with clips racking up millions of views in under an hour. But behind the applause, fear was spreading, because this wasn't just rhetoric. It was a direct challenge to a man who doesn't take kindly to warnings. In Moscow, the response was immediate. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov condemned the statement as an act of verbal aggression, accusing Britain of deliberately escalating a conflict it doesn't understand. Russian state media began airing footage of missile tests and fighter jet drills, calling them routine readiness exercises. But military analysts weren't fooled. They knew what that footage really meant, a warning shot in reply. Inside Downing Street, advisors scrambled. Some praised the Prime Minister's courage, calling it Britain's Churchill moment. Others whispered about recklessness, saying Putin doesn't bluff, and neither should we. Yet Starmer seemed unfazed. Sources close to his security team revealed that the UK's cyber command had been quietly put on alert hours before the speech, suggesting he knew exactly what kind of reaction he'd provoke. But the real story wasn't just political, it was moral. For years, Europe's leaders had walked a fine line between condemnation and caution. Starmer's message was a declaration that the line had finally been crossed. The question now, was it bravery or brinkmanship? As the world watched, European capitals began reacting. In Berlin, officials expressed measured support, but urged calm. In Paris, President Macron privately described the speech as dangerous honesty. In Warsaw, however, it was a different story. Polish leaders applauded publicly, with one senior minister declaring, "At last, someone in London remembers what courage sounds like." But not everyone was cheering. Back in London, opposition MPs demanded clarification, warning that the Prime Minister might have just invited a cyber war. Security sources leaked that multiple British government networks had already detected probing attempts from Russian IPs in the hours following the speech. Coincidence? No one believed that. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Late that night, as journalists scrambled to verify new cyber reports, an encrypted diplomatic cable from Moscow was intercepted by European intelligence. It contained a chilling line allegedly sent to the Russian Security Council. "The British have chosen confrontation. We will remind them what isolation feels like." By dawn, the story had broken worldwide. Markets opened shaky, oil prices spiked, and defense stocks soared. The British pound fell 2% in early trading as fears of Russian retaliation gripped investors. But for the Prime Minister, there was no turning back. The man once accused of being too cautious had just ignited a new geopolitical fire, and there was no guarantee he could control the flames. Inside Whitehall, aides described an atmosphere of controlled panic. The Foreign Secretary reportedly asked, "Has he just dragged us into a Cold War 2.0? No one had an answer. Meanwhile, Deep beneath London in the government's secure crisis room, Starmer was already preparing his next move, a decision that, if leaked, could shake NATO itself, because this wasn't just a message to Putin, it was a signal to the entire world that Britain was done watching from the sidelines, and what Starmer planned next would make the warning look like a whisper. The world didn't have to wait long for Putin's response. Within 24 hours of Starmer's historic speech, Moscow made its move, and it was brutal, calculated, and chillingly effective. Just after 3 a.m. London time, a massive cyber attack hit the UK's financial and communications sectors. Internet traffic dropped across several cities, airports reported system failures, and 2 major banks temporarily froze online transactions. No official claim of responsibility came, but everyone knew where it came from. Russia had answered Britain's warning with one of its own. By sunrise, the headlines were everywhere. Cyber war on Britain, Moscow retaliates, Europe on alert, the pound slid again, gas prices surged, and European leaders held emergency calls through the night. In Brussels, NATO headquarters lit up like a command center. An emergency session was convened under Article 4, the one reserved for threats to the security of the alliance. For the first time in years, the alliance wasn't debating Ukraine or sanctions, it was debating Britain itself. According to leaked transcripts, several NATO members, particularly Germany and Italy, expressed fears that Starmer's rhetoric had provoked unnecessary escalation. One diplomat reportedly asked, "Are we prepared to go to war over a British speech?" The comment leaked within hours and ignited a storm of outrage across the UK. Starmer's allies framed the attack as proof of his courage. Critics framed it as the price of recklessness. But what nobody knew, at least not yet, was that the Prime Minister had already anticipated the cyber strike. Sources inside GCHQ later confirmed that British cyber defense teams had been operating under Condition Red since the night of the speech. They had even planted traceback beacons in several fake government servers, baiting Russian hackers into a trap. And it worked. By mid-morning, Starmer received an intelligence briefing marked eyes only. The report revealed that the British counterintelligence program had identified at least 4 Russian digital infiltration points, 2 of them routed through Belarus, 1 through Serbia, and 1 through a Moscow-based defense contractor tied to the Kremlin. Starmer's reaction, according to one witness, was cold and calm. "Then we show them we can play their game too," he reportedly said. Within hours, a quiet operation codenamed Iron Line was launched. Its details remain classified, but insiders claim it involved coordinated cyber countermeasures, information leaks, and strategic signal interference across Russian communication channels. By the next morning, Russian state television suddenly went offline for 6 minutes, replaced briefly by a flashing message. The truth can't be silenced. No one claimed responsibility. But online forums across Europe exploded, calling it Britain's invisible counterpunch. Meanwhile, the diplomatic crisis deepened. The French president called for calm. Germany urged restraint. But in Eastern Europe, in Poland, Latvia, and Estonia, crowds cheered outside British embassies, waving Union Jacks alongside NATO flags. To them, Starmer's defiance wasn't dangerous. It was long overdue. Then another shock. Late that evening, Russia announced the suspension of all trade talks with the UK and ordered British diplomats to leave Moscow within 72 hours. British media called it the Second Cold War, but this time, the front line wasn't tanks or troops. It was information, economy, and fear. Back in London, the Prime Minister addressed the nation in a late-night broadcast. The room was dimly lit, the tone grave but unwavering. "Britain will not bow to cyber blackmail," he declared. "We will defend our sovereignty, and we will stand by our allies no matter the cost." Millions watched in silence. Some saw courage, others saw catastrophe. But everyone knew this was no longer just diplomacy. This was confrontation, live and global. The next morning, as dawn spread across Europe, satellite imagery confirmed what Western intelligence had feared. Russian troop movements near Kaliningrad had tripled overnight. Warships were repositioning in the Baltic. A NATO early warning jet was scrambled out of Germany. It was official. The tension had reached its breaking point. Inside the Pentagon, a senior official reportedly remarked, "We've gone from Cold War to Code Red in 48 hours. A prime minister's warning, a superpower's counterattack, and a continent holding its breath. Has Starmer reignited Britain's leadership or stumbled into the most dangerous standoff of our time? Was this courage or catastrophe? Tell us what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story left you speechless, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next between London and Moscow could rewrite the future of Europe. The age of diplomacy is over, and the era of confrontation has begun.